Good evening, everybody, and welcome to For Your Information 10, hosted here on CyberTank. My name is Collin Knopp-Schwyn. I am the host of For Your Information, and I am so glad to have you all with us this evening, be it 8 o'clock if you're in the Eastern time zone, or 7 o'clock if you're in the Central time zone. For our intents and purposes, there are no other time zones that matter. This is, as you might guess, the 10th For Your Information that has ever happened in history. The first one happened about a little under 2 years ago in May 2019. It was at the Physical Tank in Midtown Manhattan. It's a off-Broadway theater. So we had two For Your Informations in the Physical Theater, and then the coronavirus pandemic happened, and the other 8 of them have all been online, which is great because it allows us to have presenters from all across the country, all across the 2 time zones that exist within this great nation of ours. So we have a great show for you tonight. We have 9 folks presenting. It's going to start with me, followed up by Elizabeth Fetterolf, Andrea Levine, Cina-Bernard, Rob Barbeau, Mike Fracentese, Norling-Ruggles, Talia Feldberg, and finishing us off with Elise Durand. The way this is going to work, it's going to be 9 4-ish minute presentations, hopefully not too much over, by people with niche interests in what they're going to talk about this evening. I've gotten some previews of what these things are going to be, and I think it's going to be a pretty good show. There's also going to be a question and answer session at the end of the show. So if you have any questions for our presenters tonight, or if the presenters have any questions for each other, feel free to drop those here in the public comments. Say hey. I'll be able to throw those up on the screen like so. So you can hopefully get your questions answered by the presenters, the experts themselves. As is customary for these things, I will be presenting first here. I will also mention, though, that if you've been to any previous For Your Informations, we have had a secret judge somewhere in our audience. This time around, we have a no secret judge show. This time around, we are doing an all Audience Choice Awards show, which means that after all 9 presentations, you, our beautiful audience, are going to get the chance to vote for your favorite performer. And then the top 3 performers are going to receive a luscious cash prize of $10, Venmo directly into their Venmo accounts. So that's the structure of the show. That's about everything you need to know, I think. And yeah, let's get going with with my one of these. Thank you all for being with us this evening, and let's talk a little bit about gay picture books. Get myself out here. Since this is the 10th For Your Information, I thought I'd do a presentation that was spiritually connected to my presentation from the first 4YI back in May 2019, in which I asked who wrote the first lesbian picture book. Since then, I've decided it would be cool and adult of me to collect queer and trans picture books. In the past 2 years, I've managed to collect a total of 18, of which 15 are fictional. Of these 15, 7 are about parent characters in same-gender relationships. The other 9 are about queer characters who aren't parents. Now, do you notice any patterns? Look, I won't pretend that my book collecting habits are a perfect random sample of all that there is to offer in the world of same-gender romance picture books, but there's a clear trend among my little assortment. Fictional picture books starring queer characters who are not parents tend really inordinately to center royalty in their main casts. So what's this about? Broadly speaking, royalty has not always been a central feature in gay or lesbian picture books. This, to some degree, reflects a shift in who these books have been written for, with the earliest ones in the late 70s through 90s targeted towards the children of lesbian or gay parents. Early works sought to represent kids with queer parents, but really explicitly shied away from what was considered a dangerous narrative at the time, that queer kids existed at all, and especially that they might be the children of queer adults. Inseparable from this pernicious cultural belief was this notion that queerness was transmissible, an idea, of course, abetted by the AIDS pandemic, and that any contact between queer adults and innocent children, especially in a parent-child relationship, risked grooming kids or turning them gay. Out of this culture, we get 2 mommy or 2 daddy books, books that are just as inoffensive as possible and shirk the notion of queerness as transmissible by being largely assimilationist. Hey, look, gay families are just like straight ones. They're just like single-parent families. They're just like extended families. They're just like your family. It's not until 2000 that we get a well-known picture book with gay characters who aren't parents, and it's kind of a weird one, honestly. Of all the books in this collection, King and King feels the least like it solely exists for representation's sake. It's got actual characters, villains, jokes, and exists in a fractured version of the real world, with characters hailing from Texas and India. King and King is very much its own thing, a weird precursor to later gay royalty picture books. This genre then lies dormant for about a decade and a half until 2014, with the release of a few self-published and honestly kind of so-so works. Then, in the years following the legalization of same-gender marriage in the US, another burst of gay royalty fiction crops up with higher production value pretty much across the board. Suddenly there's room in the world not just for queer moms and dads, but queer young people as well. Okay, but what's with all the royalty? I think the answer again lies in the assimilationist impulse, to keep these books as safe and agreeable to the mainstream audiences as possible, and to assure queer readers that they're just like everyone else. These books tend to do this by placing their stories not just in royal settings, but in explicitly Disney-fied fairy tale style settings. Of these books, 7 of the 8 feature either a dragon or a magical transformation. The monolithic Disney fairy tale format is one of the few places where romance between young characters is considered by the mainstream to be acceptable. These books take the safest way of portraying romance between kids and swap out the characters with different gender attractions for similar characters with same gender attractions. It shouldn't come as a surprise that 6 of these 8 works end with their protagonists marrying, a common feature of the safe Disney-style fairy tale, and a reification of desire ultimately subsumed into state-approved monogamous structures. It's not a problem that this kind of book exists, but it's kind of a problem that the majority of books about queer young people exist in this sanitized imaginary realm and end in exactly the same way. There's a lot more to say about this, but I'm low on time, so I want to offer a counterpoint to this gay royalty bubble. The 9th book in my collection of queer non-parent books is the bilingual Cuando Amamos Cantamos, or When We Love Someone We Sing to Them. This book is cute as shit. It's about set in a contemporary world, and is it about a boy who asks his father to tell how he can tell another boy in his class that he likes him. The father explains that the best way to do this is by writing a song, and describes how he did the same for the boy's mother. It's a book not only explicitly about a realistic, real world, but the queerness and desire in it are essential to the narrative and to its beauty. Go check it out and support picture books that do more than playing to safe assimilationist fantasies of what queerness should be, instead boldly exploring what queerness can be. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Thanks for listening to that, everyone. Seriously, huge recommendation for this book. Stunningly, the New York Public Library, where I live, does not have it, and I really feel like they should, because I think of all these books in my collection, this is the only one that's actually made me cry. So, huge recommendation for Cuando Amamos Cantamos. Okie doke, let's get this out of here. Up next for our second presentation, we have the one, the only Elizabeth Fetterolf popping you in here. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi.
How you doing?
I can also attest to the fact that that book made me cry when I read it as well. So
it's so good.
Big recommendation. It's so good. It's so good.
What are you going to be talking about tonight, Elyse?
I'm going to be talking about a specific academic conference that kicked off what we now call the Feminist Sex Wars.
Oh, incredible. I'll take you in here right now.
Great. So if you've ever taken a women's studies or a feminist theory class, gone down a Wikipedia rabbit hole about the second wave of feminism, or hell, even lived through the second wave yourself, you're probably familiar with the Feminist Sex Wars. This was sadly not a battle between a bunch of queer women over their complicated relationship drama, but a battle between mostly white feminist writers and academics about how the movement should relate to issues of sexuality, centered around 3 main things: sex work, porn, and BDSM. Importantly, this period was considered to be the end of the second wave and the beginning of what some have referred to as the third wave, sex-positive feminism, think Riot Girl, Slut Walks, etc. But overall, it started because of some very chaotic infighting between 2 notoriously petty populations, academics and tiny political groups. I'm going to talk about the 1982 Barnard Conference on Sexuality, which was the site of this initial drama and is widely considered to be the beginning of the feminist sex wars. So let's introduce the characters. The major players. First, we have Carol Vance. She was the academic coordinator, anthropologist, and the woman in charge of the whole thing. She knew this conference was going to be messy, but she went ahead with it, and boy, did it help her career. Her most famous book, Pleasure and Danger, Exploring the Female Sexuality, was actually inspired by its events. And she still has the fact that she organized the conference in the second sentence of her current academic bio at Yale. So now we have the organizers of the conference, the academics who were kind of spearheading it, the sex positive feminists, and they were one side famously of the feminist sex wars. So the most well-known among them were Gail Rubin, Ellen Du Bois, and Ellen Willis. They believed that the feminist movement should accept sex work, BDSM, pornography, and heavily criticize anti-porn feminists, who we'll get to in a minute. The orgs that were associated with these sex positive feminists and heavily present at the conference were No More Nice Girls, a pro-sex radical feminist reproductive rights org / theater troupe founded by Ellen Willis, who was also the original co-founder of the famous radical feminist group, the Red Stockings. Samoy, which was Gail Rubin's group, an SF-based group of lesbian and gay kinksters, and they were outspoken in their rejection of Puritanism and got up to some pretty freaky shit. And then finally, my favorite, the Lesbian Sex Mafia, which is by far the best name, another lesbian BDSM group. So these guys were organizing the conference, but there was another group very much opposed to this, and they were making calls and doing everything they could do to get the conference shut down before it even started. These organizers were led by Susan Brown Miller, Andrea Dworkin, and Robin Morgan, who said the famous phrase, "Pornography is the theory, rape is the practice." And they believed that BDSM, sex work, and porn were all instruments of the patriarchy, and that feminists should vehemently oppose all three. And these are who got referred to later as the anti-porn radical feminists. They also had a group with a name so great that it actually inspired me to choose this topic, Women Against Pornography, shortened to WAP. And it's just one of those historical tidbits that is so funny, because the lyrics of WAP are exactly the kind of thing that WAP of the 1980s would have been all up in arms about. So the WAP organizers spent weeks trying to get the conference canceled. And as a result, the university actually ends up confiscating copies of the Diary of a Conference on Sexuality, which was a compilation of work by participants meant to be distributed to the attendees the day before the conference. Donors were calling and threatening to pull funding, so the organizers were under pressure from the administrators to cancel, but they went ahead with it. Then WAP members show up on the day of the conference and they picket outside. Here's a picture of them doing so. They pass out these attached flyers and protest and wear t-shirts that said "For a Feminist Sexuality" and "Against S&M." And the specific leaflet shown here basically individually calls out the members of the sex positive feminist orgs by name for shit that they've personally done in their sex lives, including but not limited to BDSM, butch femme dynamics, and lesbian relationship, and using the phrase "tops and bottoms." So very messy stuff here. And in response, the Lesbian Sex Mafia organizes a spontaneous speak out against politically incorrect sex as a kind of counter protest, where they defended queer BDSM as a liberatory practice. All in all, the conference was heavily covered by the press because sex sells, and it resulted in many books, essays, and arguments over the next decade. So why do we care about a fight between a lot of mostly queer white academics that really cemented a lot of their careers ultimately? Why do we care now? Anti-sex work and porn feminists of that era helped pave the way for what we now would call SWERFs, sex worker exclusionary feminists, who supported harmful bills like Sesta Fosta. And sex-positive feminism has been pretty widely critiqued in the past decade for putting too much emphasis on sex itself as being a liberating force. But all in all, I love looking back on this messy infighting, and I really, really love imagining how WAP would have reacted to WAP. That's all from me. Thanks so much.
Woo! Oh my God. Really horrible to find out that a theater troupe mattered at all in history.
I know, it's terrible.
That's probably the darkest part of that, I think.
Truly.
I love now we're sort of 2 for 2 presentations kind of about like assimilationist or radical like viewpoints on sex and sexuality. That's kind of a fun.
It's true.
See if we can get more of those going on here. For folks who don't know, like I generally don't know what people are going to do for their presentations until they actually do them. So this is as much a surprise to me as it is to anyone else. Thank you so much, Elyse.
Of course.
So much fun. All right, coming up next, we have Andrea Levine. Hey, Landry.
Hey, I'm excited to see how you can make my presentation be about um what did you say, like sex, like conflict around sex and queer sex and stuff. I'm
Yeah, like
excited to see how
assimilationist
this will fit in.
viewpoints versus radical ones, kind of. Yeah. So let me just take a look at your first slide here and see if I am going to be able to do it. Hmm. Not sure. I guess you'll have to talk more about this, and I'll see where it fits in.
Yeah, you let me know if if you can make it fit somehow, maybe around the assimilation angle, maybe, or something.
All right, go for it. It's all you.
Yeah, so my presentation today is entitled "A Coup in Where? Myanmar and Burma in Turmoil." So you may have heard in the news over the past few months about a military coup in the Southeast Asian country of Myanmar, in which the powerful military called the Tatmadaw arrested the head of government Aung San Suu Kyi and members of her governing party after they won an overwhelming election victory and the military alleged election fraud. Suu Kyi, the daughter of founding father Aung San, had been first detained after coming to prominence in the pro-democracy uprising of 1988, in which hundreds of thousands had marched against the military government that had ruled the country since 1962. The uprising ended after a bloody military coup by General Saw Mong ended the previous government and put down the uprising by force. The military stayed in power over the decades and began gradually opening up the government, releasing Aung San Suu Kyi from a decade and a half of house arrest and holding elections, which Suu Kyi's party won in a landslide in 2015. But while Suu Kyi is Myanmar's most popular politician, she didn't exactly push a great agenda once in power. After decades as an opponent of the regime, she came into power and promptly reconciled with the military as much as possible, including her full-throated defense of the military's ethnic cleansing and genocide against the Rohingya Muslim population in the country. So up until differences between Suu Kyi and the military led to the recent coup, they were good and fine, but now they've removed her from power. There's been fierce resistance across the country and across society, and that situation is just gradually developing. But in the news, you've probably heard this country referred to as both Myanmar and Burma. Why is that? Which one's correct? Which one should you use? Well, to start, the Burmese language has different registers. Some words are colloquial and others are literary and formal. In the Burmese language, the name of the place has always been Myanmar in the literary register, which was shortened and changed into colloquial Bama, with the change from M to B being frequent in colloquial Burmese. The name Bama became Barma in Indian languages, and when the British took the country as a colony, they named it Burma. Pro-independence parties debated what name the country should take up to its independence in 1948, but they stuck with Burma. After the military coup of 1988, the new military regime set up a commission to address the name of the country and other places, changing, for instance, the historic capital Rangoon to Yangon to reflect the R sounds that are not really used anymore in standard Burmese, and they've become more Y. This commission decided to change the English name of the country from Burma to Myanmar for a few reasons. It would reflect the official name in Burmese of the country, which is Myanmar. The regime was suspicious of colloquial Burmese, in which the name of the country is Bama or Burma. And it would be more inclusive to ethnic minorities, of which Myanmar has many. See, the name for the dominant ethnic group in Myanmar is also the Bamar people, also known as the Bama or the Burman people. But many other ethnic groups exist in the country, meaning that the ability of the country's name to encompass all ethnic groups is a key consideration when choosing the name. Okay, so briefly, we're going to take a detour into rhotic and non-rhotic English dialects. So it's worth noting here that they picked the name Myanmar as the English name for the country, but when they did that, they had in mind non-rhotic English dialects, which are English dialects that drop R's. So if you're from Britain, you'd pronounce it Myanmar, which is closer to the name in Burmese, but for us with rhotic dialects, it leaves us with an extra R. which is kind of a result of having this renaming commission be mostly generals and not language experts. So, of course, the language conflict over the English name for the country, Myanmar or Burma, is also a political conflict. Opponents of the military regime viewed the name changes as very controversial, while the regime says Myanmar is more exclusive of minorities than Burma or Bama in Burmese. Critics point out that Myanmar is just a fancy literary version of Bama anyways, and that furthermore, many ethnic minorities in the country don't speak Burmese, so they'd already become used to the English name Burma over the centuries. So the change to Myanmar to them reflected dominance of both the Burmese language and the Burma ethnic group, very ironically. Adoption of the new name was also very uneven. The United Nations recognized the name change, as did various other countries, while the United States continues to use Burma in stated opposition to the military regime. That's a new one for you, U.S. government. After the democratic reforms in the country, Myanmar began to be recognized as the official name of the country by more Western sources. But at the end of the day, in the Burmese language, there hasn't really been any change. The formal name in Burmese is still Myanmar, and the colloquial name is still Bama. And in English, you'll be fine with either one too. So in the end, keep an eye on that coup. Things are looking hairy over there, but you're fine using either Myanmar or Burma.
Fascinating. Thanks so much, Landry.
Thank you, Collin.
I feel like it's very cool to just have generals make your language decisions. Am I right in saying that?
I think it's extremely cool, and I think it leads to some weird questions when they put the R at the end, because they're kind of writing it for like British English. What do we do? How should we say it? Should we like put on a British accent when we say it, or should we just say Myanmar? I think we just say Myanmar.
British accent only English. Sheesh. I hate it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I feel like there was so much information in that.
Yeah, maybe too much. Definitely more than 4 minutes worth of information. So sorry about that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Landry. Alrighty. Up next, we have Cina-Bernard. Alex, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
You know what? I've got my caffeine-free Diet Coke, and I'm learning a lot, so I'm doing great right now.
Sounds good.
What are you talking about today?
So yeah, today I am going to go over a couple of the really bizarre Christian video games produced by Wisdom Tree Games.
Go for it.
Yeah, let's get started. So yeah, this is a brief overview of Wisdom Tree Games. So to start, we have to start by talking about Color Dreams, which was a game company founded in 1989 to sell unlicensed NES video games. So licensed NES video games contain a chip that matches a lockout chip inside the NES console itself, and they do sort of an electronic handshake. And if that handshake doesn't work, then the chip in the NES blocks the game from running. So Color Dreams decided to put a circuit in their off-brand cartridges that basically acts like a joy buzzer and sort of shocks the chip inside the NES into allowing the game to run, even though it's not licensed. So that's kind of how they started. They started making unlicensed video games for the Nintendo. Then in 1991, Color Dreams formed the Wisdom Tree label to release Christian-themed video games to kind of capitalize on that growing Christian-specific entertainment at the time. Color Dreams quit making video games in the 90s, but Wisdom Tree is still active today, mostly selling re-releases of their old games. So at this point, let's start a selection of some of the interesting Wisdom Tree games that they have made in the past. And I will start out with Sunday Fun Day. This is a conversion of a Color Dreams game called Menace Beach. In Sunday Fun Day, you need to ride your skateboard to get to Sunday school on time. Whereas in the original game, Menace Beach, you had to ride your skateboard to get to an evil gangster's hangout to save your girlfriend. And you'll see down here in the lower right-hand corner, I've got a sample cutscene from each game. So in the left, we've got the Meanwhile at Demon Dan's. And basically, in the original game, every cutscene, your girlfriend's character would lose more and more clothing. In the revamped version, we have your Sunday school teacher chastising you for being late to Sunday school. So quite a change there. Next, we've got Bible Adventures, and I've actually got my copy of Bible Adventures there. Bought it on eBay a little while ago. But yeah, this is 3 suspiciously similar games in one. In these games, you play as a biblical character. You pick up things on top of your head and you carry them to the end of the level. And you do that in every one. In Noah's Ark, you pick up animals. In this case, we've got an ox and a horse, both stacked on top of Noah's head as he carries them to the take them onto the ark. In Baby Moses, you play as Moses' mom, carrying baby Moses to dump him in a river, I guess. And then in the David and Goliath game, you pick up sheep and carry them to safety. And maybe you fight Goliath at some point. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far in it. All right, so now we get to a really weird part. So Color Dreams actually acquired the license to the movie Hellraiser, as well as the license to the Wolfenstein 3D game engine. They planned to make a Hellraiser-themed first-person shooter for the Super Nintendo, but when they changed their focus more to Christian games, they allowed their Hellraiser license to expire because that's not going to fly if you're a Christian games publisher, but they actually kept the license to the Wolfenstein 3D engine. So my question for you is, what do you get when you take Wolfenstein 3D, add Hellraiser, take out Hellraiser, add in the Bible? Well, that's right. You get Super 3D Noah's Ark. This is the only unlicensed Super Nintendo game in North America. It is a first-person shooter themed around Noah's Ark, where you have to you're on the Ark, and the animals have gotten rowdy, so you need to shoot food into their mouths with overcomplicated rapid-fire slingshots. And when you feed them the food this way, they fall asleep. And that's kind of how the game works. And if you'll see down here, the picture of the cartridge, it has another cartridge connector on top. That's because they couldn't figure out a way to get around the lockout chip that was built into the Super Nintendo. So they actually had a system where you'd plug a licensed game on top of the cartridge and plug that into the Super Nintendo. It would use the legitimate lockout chip from the licensed game, but play the game from the unlicensed game on the bottom. So it's kind of wacky. If you want to read more about this subject, I highly recommend the book Bible Adventures from the Boss Fights book series. It goes into much more history about the history of or it goes into much more detail about the history of Wisdom Tree itself. And trust me, it is a wild story. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Oh my God. I was laughing for half that presentation. Geez. Wow. Oh, I can't get over that. Thank you so much for that. I feel like I've only ever played one Bible video game in my life, and I think it was like one that was very kind of like Doom-esque, maybe.
That might be the Super 3D Noah's Ark, because
it was like a more graphic one. Like you like have to beat the devil into hell. It was like maybe an actual licensed game that was like a little bit later. I remember playing it in like late 90s, early aughts on PC.
Interesting.
And it was I feel like I read a Wikipedia article about it later on. It was like, yeah, this game was like weirdly violent for a Christian game. You like end up just like wailing on the devil. Yeah,
that's definitely different from this one then. But maybe it's who knew? Maybe there's a whole world of Christian first-person shooters out there.
I think there is, and I love knowing about it. Oh my God! Thank you so much, Alex. Incredible, thank you. Incredible work. All right, who do we have next? Up next, we have Rob. Let's find Rob in the stack here. Hey, Rob, how you doing? Your audio.
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, your presentation got me doing my linguistic drills.
Oh, Landry's presentation there before?
Landry's, yep.
Amazing.
Myanmar, Burma, Burma.
What are you talking to us about today, Rob?
We're talking about Gene Forge or Gene Drive.
Go for it.
All right. So, what is a Gene Forge? There's this amazing game I love to death. It's about wizards with the power to create life. And you, in this game, you're essentially the same as Pokemon. You pull creations out of thin air to fight by your side or sneak through the game. And then the rest of the game deals with the moral and philosophical repercussions of what it would mean to, create life from nothing. So in the game, you have the chance in every single game, and you're often not given the choice, you're just forced into it, that you get rewritten as your genetic code, and you're given massive strength, magical power, and incredible knowledge. But you see, when you have the power to create life, things get wacky, and then you've got your serviles and drakes, your subhuman creations that do your will, and your drakes that are like intelligent lizards. They rebel and they give away the power of the Gene Forge to anyone, and everyone starts doing a lot of bad noise. I could talk about the game all day, but I won't. My favorite ending of each of the games and each of the 5-game series are the ones where you decide that shaping, is too powerful. It's a little bit wrong to change and create life from nothing, maybe. And then everyone in this fantastical world decides that, you know what, let's forget about this power we have. But that's bullshit. And it's complete bullshit for the same reason you cannot close Pandora's box. Because once you've opened that box, you can't close it. Everything's gone now. And that's the same thing as what's happening in modern genetic engineering sciences. Maybe you've heard of CRISPR or Cas9, CRISPR-Cas9 system. If you don't know what those mean, I encourage you to learn about them because they are mind-blowing and revolutionary. But quickly, what is CRISPR-Cas9? CRISPR-Cas9 is a system composed of a genetic sequence, the CRISPR sequence, and an enzyme, Cas9. CRISPR will fall into the genome, lock up with a certain sequence. The enzyme will then make a cut at that point in the sequence, and then things can happen because you see, CRISPR being a genetic engineering tool made of genes and enzymes, those can be inserted into a being's DNA. And then the body starts producing those same gene editing tools constitutively, or all the time, spreading eventually to the genomes in your gonads. And then your children, your children's children, and all your children's 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 children will have this gene editing system in their very being. That is what we call a gene drive. Now, gene drives are essentially the real-life gene forge. They have the power to cause massive changes to the whole populations. You want mosquitoes to be resistant to malaria? Bam! Gene drive. You want all humans to be Aryan and Nazi crazy bullshit? Bam! Gene drive. You want to make all dogs have green photosynthetic fur and venomous bites? Gene drive. Why am I talking about this? Well, here's the point. We cannot put this scary, mind-blowing technology away. We need to figure out how to use this power responsibly because there is no other option. Because once we figured it out, you can't just forget about it. Now, I could talk a lot more about the non-GMO project, but folks who think we can just ban technologies and use consumerism, capitalism to banish these technologies, they're delusional. They're fighting against the tides of knowledge and discovery. It's not real. So what can you as a common person do? Nothing. You can hope for the best. The technology is complicated and in its infancy, but there's no way it's going away. If an institution such as the University of Minnesota or Monsanto is going to act in the best interest of humanity, we may get things like never needing to apply nitrogen fertilizer again, or never having malaria, or wiping the common flu off the face of the planet. At the same time, a mad bioengineer could release terror. But there's really not a lot to do about all this, because when it comes to the gene forge, that power is not going away. It's been hidden for the history of humanity, and we've uncovered it, and there's no way to cover it back up. So all there is to do is sit back and worry. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Rob. I think that may be our gloomiest presentation yet tonight. Excellent. All right. Up next, we have Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hey there. How's it going?
You know, hanging out with my caffeine-free Diet Coke in my room.
Nice.
How you doing? You got any caffeine-free Cokes or anything?
I've got a caffeine-free beer. Close enough.
That counts. What are you talking about tonight, Mike?
Tonight, I'm going to be talking about some of my very favorite Christian heresies and what they have in common. All right. How's my audio? My audio is good? Yes? Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Beautiful. So, this is heretical sex and heretical sex. Hi. Okay. Christianity is the world's largest religion with 2.4 billion followers. It began in the 1st century as a sect of Judaism. Despite early persecution in the Roman Empire, it spread around the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know about Christianity. I don't need to go into that. The largest Christian denomination today is the Roman Catholic Church, with approximately 1.3 billion baptized. That's like 1/6 of the world's population. It certainly bills itself as like the true Christian church. Obviously, there are other Christian denominations as well. We can see here a timeline of historical Christian schisms. The East-West Schism separated the Roman Catholic Church from the Eastern Orthodox Church, and the Protestant Reformation split the Western Church into the Roman Catholic Church and all the Protestant denominations. But there are some really interesting little offshoots pre-Protestantism that I want to talk about that are like really, really weird, really fun. You don't hear about them much. So here are a few of those. First up, the Atomites. So the Atomites are there's really 2 sets of Adamite movements. The first sect was in North Africa in the 2nd through 4th centuries, so like really early days. In the Middle Ages, there was a Neo-Adamite resurgence in places like the Netherlands and Germany. Both sets of sects had the same distinction, beliefs, and practices. They practiced a holy nudism and rejected marriage as foreign to Eden. I'm especially fond of the Atomites of Bohemia, the particularly prone to heresy medieval kingdom in the lands of today's Czech Republic. One historian observed that in this sect, free love seems to have been the rule. The Atomites declared that the chaste were unworthy to enter the Messianic kingdom. They were much given to ritual naked dances held around a fire. Indeed, these people seem to have spent much of their time naked, ignoring the heat and cold, and claiming to be in the state of innocence enjoined by Adam and Eve. And they were criticized for other heretics of the time and place as never thinking of earning their own living by the work of their hands. Frankly, I think that's the religion for me. Next up, first this is a picture of the Atomites in Amsterdam, naked dancing in the square. The Catholics hated them. Next up are the Bogan Mills. They were led by Bogan Mill in the 10th century in the First Bulgarian Empire. They believed that God created the soul, but that matter was the invention of Satan, who was opposed to God, but ultimately inferior. So opposing the material world, they didn't use the cross or build churches, but considered the body to be their temple. Had a spiritual practice emphasizing fasting, celebrating, and dancing. The Bogan Mills have the unique and questionable honor of being the origin of the word buggery, the British word for sodomy. This has its roots in Bogan Mill dualism. Because the Bogan Mills believed in the inherent sinfulness of the material world, they condemned procreation and procreative sex. Their critics then accused them of engaging exclusively in anal sex. While provocative and lurid, there's really no proof that this is true, because the critics were, of course, biased and, doing propaganda in saying that. Of course, there's also not much proof that it wasn't true. The sources are quiet definitively on the matter. That same accusation was leveled at this next sect, the Cathars, who were big in the 12th, 14th centuries in like northern Italy and southern France. It's unclear if they were related to the Bogan Mills or if they had simply, shared predecessors in earlier movements. In any case, they expanded on Bogan Mill dualism, believing in two gods, the good God of the New Testament, who created the spiritual realm, and the evil God of the Old Testament, who created the physical realm. They believed that humans were the spirits of angels trapped in the material realm, destined to be reincarnated until they achieved salvation through baptism and returned to the spiritual realm, which, feels a little Scientology, but still pretty unique for its time. The Catholic Church had a really flat structure, with the only hierarchy being between unbaptized believers and baptized believers known as perfecti, or perfects. The perfecti were religious leaders but had strict obligations for purity. Many Cathars would be baptized on their deathbeds at a point when these obligations would last for, of course, a much shorter time. So just as their theology was distinct from the Catholic Church's, so were their social views. Cathars were pacifistic and opposed war, capital punishment, and binding oaths of service. These are fairly radical views now, and were even more so, of course, in medieval Europe. The baptized perfecti were even required to abstain from consuming animals. Also unique for the time period was the fact that Catharism permitted women to be leaders in the community. Many widowed women were baptized as perfecti, and for non-noble women in feudal Europe, this provided a level of social power and freedom that no other institution could really match. For this reason, women were the real drivers of Catharism's spread. The church responded to the rise of Catharism first with its usual peaceful methods of propaganda and conversion, and when that failed, the Catholic Pope declared a crusade against the Cathars of southern France, the Albigensian Crusade. This image here is a depiction of the Albigensian Crusade. The Cathars are in the middle. This is also, here on the left is the excommunication of the Cathars by the Pope, and here on the right we see, French knights assaulting Cathars. So the Albigensian Crusade was a 20-year campaign with both its stated religious purpose, but also some political motivations for strengthening the Kingdom of France. It's known for its acts of extreme violence against civilians. Several historians, including Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide, have called it a genocide. And when a Roman Catholic abbot who played a prominent role in the crusade was asked how to distinguish Cathars from Catholics, he said, "Kill them all, let God sort them out," which I know you've all heard just in culture. It has since been used as an unofficial slogan by the U.S. military or various units in the U.S. military since the Vietnam War. I am over time here, so I'll cut things short, but all of these different heresies have some shared ideological beliefs in that they're all ultimately Gnostic heresies. Gnosticism is this, framework towards Christianity, but also towards the metaphysical in general that relates to like the individual's ability to know and to understand, which is something that, of course, institutionalized religion has always frowned on, because the Catholic Church wants us to think that only we or only they can speak to the nature of reality. This is a picture of Philip K. Dick, contemporary sci-fi author, not contemporary, but like 20th century sci-fi author who was very much influenced by Gnostic texts. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
I love the. Oh, did you just leave? Oh, your audio only. Hi.
Oh,
I love the. I just love the Bogan Mills, led by Bogan Mill.
Yeah, it's unclear if he named himself after the church or if the church was named after him. Either way.
The Mike Fracenteses, led by Mike Fracentese.
Yeah. Which came first?
It's good to have a hustle. Thanks so much, Mike. All right. Before we head on to our next presenter, who's Abby, I just want to let everyone in the audience know two things. First of all, this show is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by caffeine-free Diet Coke. I just like it. My caffeine-free Diet Coke story is that, and I decided against doing a 4YI about this, but for up until last month, seemingly, between November 2020 and last month, the Coca-Cola company was not shipping any caffeine-free Diet Coke, which is a great beverage if you want to have a little mixer with a cocktail or something in the evening, but don't want the caffeine of a Coke. They weren't shipping any of it because of apparently there's a national aluminum shortage because everyone is, there's many fewer kegs being used by bars because everyone's stuck inside because of, the whole pandemic thing. So that means there's an aluminum shortage, and apparently the first to go was the caffeine-free Diet Coke. I looked in stores for it for a long time, and it was not available. I just really like caffeine-free Diet Coke, and I'm making that my thing this show. The other piece of information I want to share with everybody is that if you are interested in presenting in a For Your Information, we do these, every month and a half maybe. If you're interested in presenting yourself, feel free to shoot me an email, Collin, 2Ls, at thetanknyc.org, or hit me up on social media if you know me. And I'd love to get you on the list for our next 4YI, which will either be happening sometime late May or early June, depending on when I get around to making it happen. All right, up next we have Abby Norling-Ruggles. Hey, Abby, how you doing?
I'm good. I appreciate the benefits you get from being a host of this show, are that you can do your own little mini 4YI on on Coke in addition to your official one.
Yeah, I just get to really slip it in there. It's I don't know. I mean, if you wanna talk about a soda, I guess run your own fucking show, right?
Yeah, I guess. I'll keep that in mind.
What are you talking to us about today, Abby?
Well, my presentation is called Let Deusa Fuck, and it is about the character of Deusa in the video game Hades. So let me first tell you about the video game Hades. It is called Hades. It's set in Hades. It stars the son of Hades, who is named Zagreus, and you play Zagreus fighting your way out of the underworld. It's mostly a fighting game, but it has a lot of fun, like, character moments and relationship arcs to it. And it also has very intentionally horny character design. Here's a quote from the director of the game, who said, "There's this idea of heroic nudity that dates back to ancient Greek art. I guess this is me telling you with a straight face that the gods in Hades are friggin' hot as part of our commitment to honoring the source material." And this game also has 3 romance arcs, quote-unquote romance arcs, which I will be spoiling here, so be aware of that. You can tell in Hades whether a character is officially a romanceable character or not based on the relationship meter you get with them that fills with hearts as you progress your relationship with them. For the romanceable characters, it has this little Cupid arrow thing. And for the non-romanceable characters, like your dog, it's just hearts. So there are 3 specific romanceable characters. And here they are. This is, on the left, you have Megara, who's a fury. In the middle, Thanatos, who is the god of death. And then on the right, you have Deusa, who is a play on Medusa. She is a Gorgon who is a floating head, and that's her deal. She's a maid in the House of Hades. Now, you may notice there are some differences between these characters. So the 2 on the left, you can actually have a full romance arc with that becomes sexual. And I really actually like the way that they do this. It involves a point in the game where you're allowed to choose whether to create that romantic and sexual relationship or back off. And the game makes it pretty clear that both are perfectly fine. You know, there's no negative consequences for not pursuing romance and sex, but you can do it, and you can also date both of them at once, which is cool and fun. However, with Deusa, there is only one outcome of the romance arc, and that is that she rejects you. So here's a screenshot from right after you ask her out. She says no. You ask if there's someone else in her life, and she says somebody else romantically. Not really, no, it's not really my thing. And this and several other interactions imply that Deusa is an asexual or aromantic character, which is cool. It's cool representation to put a character like that in a game. However, let's take a quick detour here to the sexuality of marginalized people. People with non-normative bodies experience sexual marginalization in various different ways. You can be hypersexualized, which is something that often happens to people of color, trans women, where they're unable to be seen as non-sexual regardless of context. But you can also have desexualization, which often happens to disabled people. And here's a quote from a disabled writer, S.E. Smith. "There's a popular sense that disabled people are undate/touch/knowable, that we neither want to establish romantic/and sexual relationships, nor are we capable." And this feels like a fairly obvious thing to say, but obviously sexual desire does not correlate with perceived sexual availability. Of course, there are asexual people who are disabled, but there are also disabled people with full and rich sex lives, of course. So back to Deusa. Deusa is obviously not a real-life disabled person. She is a floating head in a video game. And she definitely reads as a genuine attempt to write an ace or arrow character in a queer game. But she's also a very convenient pick because if she is uninterested in sex or romance, then the viewer does not have to consider sex or romance with her, while they can move forward having sexual relationships with the more conventionally attractive and sexually available characters. So in conclusion, let Deusa fuck and or let some of the conventionally attractive characters not fuck. That's my pitch for Hades. It's a great game, though, and you should play it.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Abby.
Yeah, no problem.
I feel like we have like a weird. I did not. We've only done one themed 4YI, but I feel like there's a weird like through current here of like Christianity and like sex and video games, and they're all.
There's a strong theme developing. I'm impressed by it.
Landry, I think you're still the outlier with your Myanmar presentation. I'm sorry, haven't tied that in yet. But thank you. I gotta get this game. I gotta do it eventually.
It's a really good game. This maybe didn't come across in the presentation as much as it could have. It's an extremely fun game, and everyone should play it.
What type of game is it?
It's a fighting roguelike. So a big part of the gameplay is that you die over and over again, but you're the son of Hades, so you just get resurrected in the palace in Hades.
Okay.
And so you actually progress the game by dying. It's pretty cool.
Cool, just like in real life. Cool.
Yeah, exactly like in real life.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. Okay, 2 more presentations to go. Up next, we have several time for your information Secret Judge Award winner. I don't remember in what categories. Talia Feldberg. Talia, hey, how you doing?
It's great to be back.
Yeah, you've been not with us for a few shows, right?
It's true. But I was working on another thing at the tank. But back now, very excited. Missed it.
Welcome back. What are you talking about tonight?
Talking about vampires. Yes. Here we go. All right. So the name of this presentation is Polidori's Revenge, or Lord Byron to Count Von Count in 5 Easy Steps. I'm going to tell you how the vampire, defined as an undead figure that sustains itself by preying on the living, went from an ancient multicultural folklore concept to the specific and recognizable archetype we know and love today. Step 1. Lord Byron. You may recognize this man as one of the major English Romantic poets. He was also a self-centered hedonist, famously described as, quote, mad, bad, and dangerous to know. The idea of the Byronic figure, a moody, brooding, rebellious, mysterious, charismatic, sexually dominant outsider, originates with both Byron's characters and his own persona. We join him in 1816. Byron is hugely famous, but his recent marriage is failing, and he's plagued by scandalous rumors, all of which are true, by the way, of cruelty, adultery, incest with his biological half-sister, and bisexuality, which was a big problem at the time. Things are bad enough that he leaves England, employing as his personal physician and traveling companion a 20-year-old doctor and wannabe writer named John William Polidori. They end up in Switzerland at the Villa Diodati on Lake Geneva and spend the summer chilling with the young and then unknown Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley, and their permanent third wheel and Byron's erstwhile lover, Mary's stepsister Claire Claremont. Their summer plans are complicated by the fact that 1816 is so cold it's known as the, quote, year without a summer. While the gang is stuck inside, someone suggests they write their own scary stories. Mary begins what will later become Frankenstein, and Byron writes a fragment of a story inspired by the then popular vampire folklore of Eastern and Southern Europe. I should mention that Byron and Polidori's relationship is on the rocks at this point. Polidori is insecure and erratic, despite his worship of Byron, and he's fired by the end of the summer, but he will have the last word. Part 2, The Vampire. 3 years later, in 1819, a story called The Vampire is published in Colburn's new monthly magazine. It's by Polidori, although initially attributed to Byron. They're both mad about this, although it does help make the story a huge hit. The vampire concerns a young Englishman who sets out on a continental tour with an older, dissolute aristocrat. Sound familiar? The aristocrat, Lord Riven, turns out to be a vampire who victimizes the narrator's sanity and also his sister. Several details are taken from Byron's fragment, and the name is taken from another thinly veiled depiction of Byron in the 1816 novel Glenarvan, written by Byron's rightfully disgruntled former lover, Lady Caroline Lamb. There's a pattern here. Anyway, Riven is an aristocrat with, quote, dead gray eyes and a face of, quote, deadly hue, like the pale gray-eyed Byron. He's a similarly charismatic figure, now literally hypnotic, and they both have a thing for young women, although Byron's is at least somewhat less fatal. Riven was the first major literary vampire, and the existing power and popularity of the Byronic type made him very influential indeed, because 30 years later, we get Step 3, Varney the Vampire. Varney the Vampire, or The Feast of Blood, was a serialized Gothic horror story published in cheap pamphlets known as penny dreadfuls between 1845 and 1847. The writers, James Malcolm Rymer and Thomas Peckett Prest, were paid by the line, so the final product is nearly 667,000 words long. For context, this is more than 3 Moby Dicks. Sir Francis Varney is a nobleman who is brought back from the dead through scientific misadventure or divine judgment. Various backstories are given. Over more than 200 installments, he spends his time terrorizing various noble families, pursuing women and money, although eventually he becomes less overtly evil and more of an existentially tortured black sheep. Eventually, he ends it all by jumping into Mount Vesuvius. Like Riven, Varney is aristocratic, hypnotic, pale, and victimizes young women. This is where we get the iconic image of a vampire coming through a bedroom window. Varney also introduces some important qualities. He has a long black cloak, as you've seen, and he's the first vampire with fangs, which he uses to leave puncture wounds in the necks of his victims. He also has superhuman powers, notably super strength, which Lord Riven generally did not. Varney is also the first sympathetic vampire, who doesn't necessarily want to be a vampire, but is nonetheless enthralled to his condition. This complexity won't reappear until later in the 20th century. But we're moving just a few decades forward now to step 4, Dracula. You've probably been waiting for this one. It is, of course, a novel published in 1897 by Bram Stoker, an Irishman who worked for famous Victorian actor-manager Henry Irving. It was initially well regarded, although not a bestseller. In crafting Count Dracula, Stoker drew on sources like the 15th century Wallachian prince Vlad the Impaler, also known as Vlad Dracul, and on his boss, Irving. Most importantly, however, he drew on existing vampire folklore and literature, including everything we've discussed here, as well as Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 novel Carmilla, which I'm not focusing on today, but which is about a lesbian vampire and is amazing. I won't get too into the plot of Dracula, which you probably know, but Dracula himself obviously possesses all of the qualities we've discussed so far. But this is where we get the Transylvania thing, although Eastern Europe had long been associated with vampires. Also, although both Riven and Varney had been healed by moonlight, sunlight wasn't dangerous to them. Dracula is the first vampire to be fully nocturnal. I will also mention that Dracula in the novel is kind of a gross old man. The sexy Dracula we're used to comes from the iconic performance of Bela Lugosi in the 1920 stage adaptation and the 1931 film. And Dracula, of course, brings us to step 5, Count von Count. Of course, he's just one representative of the afterlife of this archetype. He doesn't fit it perfectly, but he wouldn't exist without it. Same goes for a lot of other modern vampires I can think of, even if they're a bit more subtle. In short, all the vampire content you've ever consumed can be traced back to a dude complaining about his boss. The end.
Thank you so much, Talia.
You're welcome.
It's always really stressful. Not stressful. It's always really horrible. I don't know. It's always really something to find out, like, all these connections between, like, people in, like, the early 1800s or whatever, and, like, realize that, like, all of history is just, like, different friend groups, you know?
It really is. And listen, like, if I wasn't trying to limit to 4 minutes, there are a lot of other connections that it's a little spooky how much of our culture is just some folks hanging out.
Yeah, and I feel like it's wild
ago.
how much, like, these like canonical, like, ideas of vampires are just, like, you know, somewhat recent. Like, I don't know, the Bela Lugosi Dracula is 101 years old now. It's like, that's not time immemorial kind of thing. That's like 1 century ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And then these things just become, like, so popular. It feels like they're in the water, and it's hard to imagine, like, one person coming up with it, or, like I showed, a kind of group of people who are picking up on each other's ideas.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take your thing down here. Boop. Okay. All right. And last but certainly not least, we have Elise Durand popping up here. Hi, Elise.
Hello. How are you?
You know what? Well, I've got my caffeine-free diet Coke, so I'm doing pretty well. And I'm also buoyed by all these excellent presentations that we've had so far.
Oh my gosh, my head is full of knowledge.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be buoyed by one more great presentation. What are you talking about tonight?
Oh yeah, here we go. I am presenting what is not in fact an argument, but merely truth. Blue by Joni Mitchell is the greatest album of all time, and here is why. Let's start with how Joni Mitchell is groundbreaking within her own genre. Saskatchewan-born darling Roberta Joan Mitchell rose to prominence at the dawn of the American folk music revival movement in the mid-1960s. Her arrival instantly subverted the expectation that folk singers need not have great voices by having one of the most breathtaking mezzo-soprano ranges of any human being ever. As a child, Joni Mitchell spent a considerable amount of time in quarantine in a polio ward. Her diagnosis and health struggles deteriorated the strength and dexterity in her hands, rendering her unable to replicate most common chord shapes in a guitar's standard tuning. Instead of like giving up or, focusing on her painting, she was like, what's easier? Inventing an entire new style of playing the guitar by tuning into these unheard voices and building this rich, irreplicable musical vocabulary that is utterly her own. Okay, let's get into Blue. Blue is Joni's 4th studio album. It is 35 minutes and 41 seconds of sheer perfection. There is not a moment of vocal dishonesty in this entire thing. Her stunning voice is accompanied by guitar, classic. Everybody plays guitar, sure, yeah. Piano, for sure. Every album needs a piano. Mountain dulcimer. While largely ignored in modern urban society, the mountain dulcimer is to Appalachian culture what the Frisbee is to college campuses. Somebody shows up with a dulcimer in tow, and you know you're about to have the best goddamn day of your life. Blue is so iconic because of the arrangements, particularly Joni's use of augmented chords. Augmented chords are merely major chords wherein the 5th note in the triad is shifted to a sharp. The result is this. Every friend group has one. It's that inkling of something gone wrong. Additionally, she teases us with these suspended chords, and we as a species tend to enjoy suspended chord progressions because it feels like a roller coaster. You go up, and then you come right back down into the resolution. This album is called Blue. Joni is not resolving shit. Instead, she leaves us teetering in midair. So let's give an example of what the heck I am talking about. Tom Petty's Free Falling is a very classic song with an example of a classic major chord progression that goes into a suspended sequence and back and settling into a few major triads. Imagine if that famous progression did not resolve back into the major chords. We would spend the entire song going, was she crazy about Elvis? Was there really a freeway running through the yard, Tom? This line of questioning is so powerful and evocative and so ubiquitous in Blue. Let's talk about Blue through an astrological critical lens. Only a Scorpio could write such an intense album. Let's analyze some lyrics. In the opening number, the opening track to Blue, Joni says, I want to belong to the living, typical macabre imagery. That's very typical of Scorpios. Then she says, do you see how you're hurting me? So I hurt you too. Scorpios hold grudges and will treat you exactly as you treat them. Date a Scorpio if you'd like some self-reflection. And my favorite line in the entire album, I want to shampoo you. What a freak thing to say. And yet it is breathtakingly romantic, alluring, and intense in a way that only a Scorpio could pull off. Lyrically, there emerges this narrative arc that feels quite like getting drunk with your best friend you've not seen in a while. She tells you about her flings, and you start to get a sense of the whole picture. She goes, I met a redneck on a Grecian Isle. You go, oh my God, Carrie, the mean old one. Yeah. As the evening carries on, you catch her in contradiction, moments of unrelenting vulnerability that reveal the true story. It's not just that each song is so singular and specific, and that is what breeds the universality, but it is that she is in flux. She is wavering, and this painful indecision is so gut-wrenching. We as humans find relief in decisions and anguish in the unknown. We get these beautiful couplets that are strewn throughout the album, contradicting one another. She talks about California wanting to go back home to the warmth and the sunshine. And then, 2 songs later, she's like, hey, actually, you know what? I want a frigid body of water. I want a river that I could freaking skate away on, just like the rivers in her home in Saskatchewan. And then you're like, oh, Joni, why are you suddenly hyper fixating on skating? Why do you want to skate on this river so bad, huh? The last track you hear, Richard got married to a figure skater. Joni, are you okay? Literally, the heartbreak keeps compiling. Let's wrap up with some fun facts about Blue. In the 8th track, River, Joni Mitchell actually invented the popular commercial holiday Christmas by her adoption of Jingle Bells into a minor key. Joni Mitchell's cheekbones in the album art could cut through steak. There are only 2 occasions where it is acceptable to weep to the sound of the Canadian national anthem. One is when you are my Quebecois grandparents and I am in 2nd grade playing it to you over the phone on my trumpet. And 2 is when anybody hears the first verse of the greatest song of all time, A Case of You, and she samples the Canadian national anthem. This is why Blue is the greatest album of all time. Thank you so much. If you'd like to contribute to this discourse, follow me on Spotify, wherein I rank Joni Mitchell's entire discography. Thank you.
Oh my God. Thank you, Elyse. I love it. And you've got someone, is there someone in the room with you also?
That was me cackling to myself. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Makes me very nostalgic for actually getting to do this show in a real room and getting to, hear people's live reactions. Incredible. Thank you so much for that. We are now entering the question and answer session of the night. First thing first, I'm going to put the voting link for the Audience Choice Awards right here in the chat. I hope this works. I have not actually tried this, but I hope it works. So feel free to vote on that. We'll give about 5 minutes for that, for you to vote there. I'll let you know when the last call for that is. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions for any of our presenters this evening, either audience members or the presenters themselves? Questions for each other? I know we had one question here from my dear sweet, where is it? My dear sweet parents. Oh God. Ooh, here we go. It was about diet caffeine-free Coke. Without the caffeine and the sugar, just what is left, Collin? Thank you for asking this hard-hitting question. The answer is sometimes you just want the flavor of Coca-Cola for like a cocktail or something, and also want to go to bed before 2 a.m. All right, who has any other questions? I'll bring on our performers here. Hello, Alex and Elyse, you're back. Abby, you're back. Hi, Mike. Hi, Talia on audio. And Elyse and Landry. The gang's all here.
Hey, the gang's all here. Good job, everyone. That was great.
This is the part of the night where we all sort of pat each other on the back in silent expectation. Also, I will mention that Rob emailed to say that his power or internet was knocked out by a storm, so he is no longer here. I actually had a question for Mike, and that is, are any of the Atomites or the Bogan Mills or the Cathars, are there still any of them, or are there like neo-Atomite, Bogan Mill, or Cathar movements? And if so, are they like real, or are they just like Nazi bullshit? You're muted.
You're muted.
There we go. All right, great question. So the Bogan Mills, I found it actually persisted a fairly long time. It seems like a lot of Bogan Mills from Bulgaria were like ended up as refugees in, throughout the Balkans. And so some of those communities persisted. I mean, they're still there, but I think most of them have converted away from Bogan Millism, at least by like 1900. Atomites and Cathars, not at all. Although there have been, I learned this during research, like not a lot of, but like the Atomites were not the only like Christian nudist movement. There have been, a number of other like unrelated but relatively significant ones up till today. So I guess the closest thing to any of those that we get now are like just contemporary Christian nudists in the Western world, of which there are some.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have a question here from Amy in the chat. Amy, for Talia, I want to hear more vampire coincidences. Talk about some friend groups.
Oh God. Well, okay. This isn't like a human coincidence, but just something I think is kind of interesting is that the reason that 1816 was so cold was that Mount Tambora in modern day Indonesia had erupted the year before, and this is like the biggest volcanic eruption in recorded history. And it created something called a volcanic winter, which is it basically put enough stuff in the atmosphere that it like made it cold for the next year. And so there are like, not only do we have like Frankenstein and vampires because of this, there's all these like crop failures and famines and political stuff that gets hastened because of those crop failures and famines, and just like all kinds of spiraling effects of this one volcano.
Thank you. I remember like 10 years ago when we had the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull, and there was like all that like volcanic ash in the air, and I have not heard anyone talk about that in the last 10 years after it finished. This is a question for everybody. That's a question for our audience. Remember that? Remember 10 years ago?
I have a question for you, Collin. Can you pronounce that again?
Eyjafjallajökull.
Nice. Wow.
We have, I had a question for Alex, actually, before I ask it. Everyone get your votes in if you have not already. How much, you said you got one of the games on eBay. How much do these things go for these days?
So Bible Adventures cost me around $10 or so on eBay. Wisdom Tree is producing reproductions of these games, though, that cost a bit more and are correspondingly more fancy. And then I also bought the Super 3D Noah's Ark on Steam for about $5. So that's there if you want to experience it for yourself.
Unbelievable. We have another question for you here, too, that I'll just add in here. Did Nintendo ever take legal action against Wisdom Tree?
They did not, actually. Nintendo does not acknowledge that Wisdom Tree exists. I've heard it theorized that this is because Wisdom Tree was an explicitly Christian company. So imagine this, foreign Japanese company taking action to wipe out this Christian company. That would have driven public opinion wildly against Nintendo, back in the 90s. So, they figured it's probably just safer to don't touch them. And then I don't really have anything specific about spiritual warfare. I haven't played that one myself yet, but I am aware that it exists.
Thank you. We have a question here for Elizabeth. This is going to block out your face when hold on, maybe I can move you up. Sorry, Abby. Given the themes of the 1982 Feminist Sex Wars, where do you think feminism stands right now along those issues?
Yeah, this one's from my mom. Big question, Mom. I mean, I think feminism stands at a place now where it really needs to kind of just attack all angles of oppression, capitalism, white supremacy, the ways these things are kind of inextricable from gendered oppression and the way that they all fit together. And I think there's a lot of contemporary feminists doing that, which is great.
Thank you. Well, if we do any of our presenters have any questions for each other? Cool. Well, if there aren't any, then I am thrilled to announce the winners, the 3 winners of tonight's Audience Choice Awards. Coming in 3rd place, we have Talia Feldberg with Vampire History. Congratulations, Talia. Up in 2nd place, we have Alex with Wacky Christian Video Games. Congratulations, Alex. And in 1st place, with 40% of the vote, we have Elyse, the Joni Mitchell album. Congratulations to the 3 of you. I have a question for Elyse, I guess, which is, this is a 35-minute album, so not too long if you want to pick it up and listen to the whole thing. But if you had to pick 1 or 2 tracks, what are the top 1 or 2?
One of the ones y'all probably maybe don't know as well is This Flight Tonight. There's this pedal steel guitar part that sounds like turbulence. It's so beautiful. Would recommend. And then A Case of You is the best song ever written. So those 2.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for presenting tonight. Thank you to our audience for being here, for voting in the Audience Choice Awards, and also for participating in these comments. I didn't get a chance to throw a lot of comments up, but you know what? There were a lot of good comments in the chat tonight. So I really appreciate everyone who's here, be they in the audience or presenting. Again, if you want to get on the show, feel free to shoot me an email. We'll get you in for 4YI11, hopefully. Hope to see some of our presenters here tonight back for that one. And again, do drink caffeine-free Diet Coke, but I'm not getting paid by them, but maybe I should be. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a lovely night, and we will see you here in a month or